basically what we've had an ongoing discussion with the European Union and other countries in the world is how to deal with biometrics. How do we include biometrics in the travel documentation? And we're trying to establish a sort of international consensus through the International Civil Aviation Organization in terms of biometrics, that we can use biometrics instead of having to go through all the questioning that's required now in many instances. And as soon as the world moves toward a biometric, the issue becomes one of what's a consensus. There is a consensus, an international consensus on biometrics in terms of one biometric, because there are 4 biometrics: facial digital, voice recognition, iris, scanning of the iris, and digital fingerprinting. The consensus is right now on digital facial, but not on the second one. The United States, as a policy, we encourage people to adapt the digital finger. Why? In many countries, I know digital fingerprinting is considered a criminal process, but the fact is terrorists or criminals do not leave an imprint of their face or their voice or their iris, but they do tend to leave a fingerprint at the scene of a crime or a scene of a terrorist act. So this is why it's important for us to encourage the international community to look at fingerprinting as a second preferred biometric. The other issue, which has been much more tangled, is privacy. How do we deal with privacy, the information that we gather worldwide on passengers, the movement of people, and documentation? How do we manage privacy? The European Union has been the one that's been most pricklish about Privacy Acts, and because the Europeans come at privacy in a very different way than we do. One of the things I learned in negotiating with the Europeans on privacy issues is that privacy for Europeans means something sometimes different than it does to Americans. Europeans readily will tell their central government anything and everything they want to know about themselves, but rarely will tell the private sector. They're hesitant to tell the private sector. We Americans will not tell the government anything, but we tell Visa card everything. So then the issue comes, how do we manage and store and use information? Most of it, 99% of it, is basically uninteresting. It's just because most people are decent, law-abiding citizens. It's just we're looking for that needle in the haystack in terms of the criminal or the terrorist. So we have ongoing discussions, prolonged discussions with the European Union and other countries in the world, but primarily the European Union in terms of privacy and how to manage privacy. The main goal in the movement of people is that there's a Chertoff-Rice initiative in basically looking at how to facilitate visas much easier than they are now. We understand the onerous process that has come about after 9/11 in terms of the security concerns. For those of you that have gone to visa interviewing in an American embassy or consulate, you remember that in the old days it was, do you want to stay in the United States and do you want to work? That was a primary concern. Now that is a concern, but the real concern is, are you a threat? Are you a terrorist threat primarily? Are you a criminal threat? And that's the important focus now. And by law, we have to interview everyone. In the old days, we did not have to. There was references, or your travel agency could send your passport, and then you were a law-abiding citizen. You were given a visa. Congress passed the law after 9/11 saying that we need an interview, clearly. So we're trying to address that, and particularly the business community basically complains, as well as the academic community, in terms of how do we facilitate students, foreign students, coming into the United States. How do we do it? How do we do it more welcoming than we have in the last 3 or 4 years after 9/11? I remember one of my first luncheons 3 years ago when I took this job was in New York with a business council on international understanding, and all the basic Fortune 500 companies were at the breakfast, and they all jumped on me and they said, we can't bring our customers here. Our airline industry is competing with Airbus, and they can get visas much easier to go to France than they can to the United States, particularly Asian countries. And so we're at a disadvantage. So we had to quickly address that and how to facilitate that much better. Energy companies that need people from the Middle East, and of course the Middle East tends to raise a red flag. So we have to address that. And we're still working on these issues. But the fact is, we understand that without the movement of the swift and facilitative movement of people, we're not going to have good, thriving economies. Clearly, it is a foreign policy concern in how we manage the immigration issue. From my perspective on the international side, I deal with it because many ambassadors in the foreign missions in the United States, particularly the Latins, particularly one friend for the South, where my ancestors came from, tend to come and ask me all the time, you know, what are we going to do? Where's the pacto migratorio? You know, where's it coming about? My own sense, and I don't mean to be somewhat facile or feckless about it, but my experience about discussion of immigration traditionally has been, even I remember back in '86, the discussion of immigration has the same impact on the body politic as the moonlight has on a werewolf. It doesn't bring out the best in people sometimes. So we have to be careful how to manage that we do not shut ourselves off and become ugly Americans. As we talk with our partners in Western Europe, as we try to partner with them in terms of information sharing, the issue of immigration arises. How do we manage it? How do we deal with it? Well, primarily, I think that it's an immigration issue technically, but the real issue, it's an economic phenomena of labor mobility. So I think immigration is going to be tangled. The discussion is going to continue to be tangled. I won't make any predictions. I think I'll leave that for the Congress to do. But I feel that in terms of the international aspect of it, it'll reflect good or bad on us and how we manage it. And I think we have to do it in a very humane way, but at the same time, not losing sight of the 8-ball, that we have to address the security concerns and we have to have borders that we control, that we know who's in this country. We cannot have 11, 12 million people that we do not know who they are and where they came from and what they're doing. So we need to do better at that, and I think this is part of the discussion in Washington and will lead to that sort of constructive sense.